There was once a woodcutter who just couldn't get ahead in life. No matter how hard he tried, he always seemed to be as poor on a given day as he'd been the day before, and he felt that this just wasn't fair. Well, one day the woodcutter was called to the doctor's house in the village in order to do a bit of business. So the woodcutter went there, and the doctor's house was a house, but to the eyes of the woodcutter, it was the most wonderful, opulent place he had ever seen. It was filled with beautiful furniture and art and books. And the woodcutter just looked around this house and he thought to himself, why can't I have this? Why is it wasted on this man? What does he have that I don't have? I mean, I see that he has a lot of books. Is that what it takes to be a doctor? So the woodcutter, at the end of their transaction, went to the doctor and he said, I'm wondering if you could do me a favor. All right, said the doctor, what do you need? Well, said the woodcutter, I was wondering if you could lend me one of your books, just for a year, and it doesn't, just lend me a book. And the doctor said, which book would you like to borrow? Well, it doesn't matter, any book will do. So the doctor handed the woodcutter a random book, and the woodcutter went off happily. Well, he went home, and he set up a booth, and at the top of the booth he painted the words, Dr. Cure All. And inside the booth he sat in a long, solemn robe with the book in front of him, and ranged around him many, many little bottles of all shapes and sizes. And he told everyone he was a doctor. And people began to come to him. Now, Dr. Cure-All did not know anything about medicine, but that didn't really matter, as the people who came to him didn't really know anything about medicine either, and many of them thought they were sick when really they weren't. And therefore, Dr. Cure-All started to get a reputation for curing all. People would come to him, he would give them random medicine in random little bottles, they would take it home and they would feel better. And so his reputation started to spread. This man who could do miracles, who sat there with his book looking wise and finding the solutions to all their medical problems. And then his reputation spread beyond medicine because people started going to Dr. Cure-All and asking him about things that had gone missing. They said, listen, Dr. Cure-All, I know that you have access to powers through your book. Could you find my necklace? Or could you find my rake? Or could you find my hoe? And Dr. Cure-All would look in his book and he would go and talk to all of the family members of the person, and he would stroke his chin and look wise and knowing. And often as not, the thief would get scared and confess. It was usually somebody in the person's family. So again, people began talking about this wonderful doctor and the miraculous things he could do. Now, one day, a rich man woke up and realized that his ring, his favorite ring, was missing. And he looked everywhere for it, but it wasn't to be found. And he was distraught, but one of his servants came to him and said, Sir, have you heard of Dr. Cure-All? He's supposed to be able to find things that have gone missing. So the rich man sent his servants to fetch Dr. Cure-All to see him. And the doctor was brought into the rich man's house, and the rich man said to him, I was wondering if you would be able to find my ring that went missing. I really, really want it back. And Dr. Cure-All stood there, and again he stroked his chin, and he looked wise. And he said, well, this is a very tricky situation, very tricky indeed. I'm not sure. Oh, I think I can do it, but it will take a bit of time. See, it will take me 9 days, and I'll need to spend those 9 days in your households, so that as I am conjuring and reading and doing all the things I do, the magic will work properly. So the rich man agreed, and the doctor was installed in his household. And for the The first 6 days, the doctor lived like a king. But on the 6th day, he started to get a little bit worried, because usually in these situations, all he had to do was stand there and go, and the thieves would leap out of the woodwork, but it wasn't working that way this time, and he didn't know what to do. He knew that there were, after today, only 3 days left, and he was going to have to come up with something, or his reputation would be gone. This rich man was very influential. So the next morning, on the 7th day, when he did have only 3 days left, the doctor went for a little walk on the rich man's property, and he walked past a certain hedge, and as he went, he said to himself, well, that's the first of them, meaning that was the first of the 3 days that he had left. But you see, behind the hedge was a servant, and that servant was one of the 3 servants who had in fact stolen the rich man's ring. And he heard this, and he went, oh, does he mean me? Does he? Whoa. And he went running to his friends, and he said, the doctor knows. He identified me. He's going to tell on us. The other 2 servants were not so sure, and they said, he's been living here. This is the 7th day he's been here. He looks at us all the time, and he hasn't said anything. I don't think he knows. You're just jumping at shadows. Let's give it another day, and we'll follow him around and see what happens. So, on the 8th day, the doctor, still not knowing what to do, went for another walk, and again he was walking past the same hedge, and the 2nd servant was hiding behind the hedge. He'd been keeping an eye on the doctor. And as the doctor passed the hedge, he said, well, that's the 2nd one. And the servant went, oh no, and he went running to his friends, and he said, he does know, he does, he identified me now, he's got 2 of us. What are we going to do? He's going to tell on us. You are both paranoid, said the 3rd servant. He couldn't possibly know. There's no way. All right, guys, chill. We'll give it one more day, and at the end of that day, we'll see what we'll see. We'll follow him around again. So, the next day, the 3rd servant was commissioned to follow the doctor around, and the doctor went out for his usual walk, very nervous at this point, and was walking past his usual hedge, and by this was reminded that of what he said at the last 2 times he passed the hedge, and this time he said, well, that's the 3rd and the last of them. The 3rd servant jumped out from behind the hedge, knelt on the ground in front of the doctor, and said, oh, please, doctor, please don't tell on us. We know it was wrong. We know we shouldn't have stolen. Listen, I'll give you the ring. I'll give you a golden guinea as well. I'll do anything. Just don't tell anyone what we've done. The doctor did not miss a beat. He said, it's taken you a while to come to me. It's taken you a while. I was getting a little worried. I was afraid that I would have to tell on you. But since you have come to me, I'll see what I can do. So the servant gave the doctor the ring and the money, and the doctor pocketed the money and took the ring, and he took it off to the hen house, and he looked behind the door, and he stowed the ring behind the hen house door. And then he went about his day. Well, when the evening came, the rich man called his household in, and everybody gathered around to hear the wise words of the doctor. And the rich man called the doctor over and said, have you done it? Have you found my ring? And the doctor said, well, you see, I consulted my books, and I conjured the magical spirits, and I did the things that I always do in these situations, and I did indeed find the location of your ring. Oh, did you? Where is it then? Not so fast, you see. You see, the spirits and the magic and the magical spirits things that I do are magical, and therefore there is a restriction on the information I can give you. I can only tell you one of 2 things, and you must choose. I can tell you who took your ring, or I could tell you where the ring is now. I cannot tell you both, because magic. So the rich man thought about this, and not for very long, and said, I want to know where the ring is. I really want my ring back. So the doctor said, well, the spirits have told me that if you go to your hen house, and I do not know where that is and had never seen it before, and if you look behind the door, and I'm not sure what the door of a hen house looks like because I've never seen one before, and if you go to a panel behind the door of your hen house, whatever that means, I don't even know what a panel is, I am so ignorant, you will find your ring. And so the rich man sent his wife and the girl who usually looked after the hens, and they went to the hen house, and there indeed was the ring exactly where the doctor had said it would be. And everyone rejoiced, and they praised the doctor, and the rich man showered him with praise and also money, which he liked better than the praise, and then decided to have a great feast that evening and invite all his family and friends. Well, one of the people that the rich man invited was his brother. And his brother hadn't been around lately and hadn't heard any of this. And when he did hear the story of what had happened, the brother was a little skeptical. And he said, I'm looking at the doctor right now, and he doesn't look that wise. Are you sure you haven't been taken for a ride? He found my ring! Look, it's right here. How could he do that if he weren't as wise as he said? I don't know, said the brother. I want to test him. And I think that once I do, I'm going to be able to prove that he is, in fact, a charlatan. So the rich man agreed to allow the test, and the brother went off to make arrangements. Now that evening they held the feast, and the doctor was sitting in the seat of honor, and everyone was just ecstatic to have him there. But before they started to serve the food, a servant came out carrying a silver platter that was covered, and took this platter and placed it in front of the doctor. And then the rich man's brother stood up, and he tapped his glass, and he said, I would just like to make a speech at this point. We're all here to honor this wonderful man who has done such wonderful things, but not everybody here has seen these wonderful things, and I was thinking perhaps we could have a demonstration. I was wondering, sir, if you would be so good as to indulge me in this tiny little trifle. I'm sure it'll be super easy for you. Just look at this platter here that's covered over, and tell us all what's under the cover. Well, the doctor knew his goose was probably cooked. He said, thought to himself, I could call for my books, I could make, magic symbols in the air. None of that's going to tell me what's under that cover. I think I'd better just confess. So he looked at the rich man's brother and he said, my good sir, even the fox knows when he's been caught, and it's time to stop running. And the brother threw up his hands and he said, okay, then I guess you are as wise as everybody says. And he pulled the lid off the tray, and it was a fox. So everybody praised the doctor even more, and all of them had a feast, and they wined and they dined, and the doctor went home covered with honors, and his reputation continued to spread for the rest of his life until by the day he died, he was known throughout the land as one of the wisest men who had ever lived.